Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, let's this Kiddushin daf Dalid. We're going to begin on the top of Dalid Amud Aleph, the very top line. So we were discussing how do we know when it comes to one of the ways of being Mekadesh and Isha, which is with Kesef, that's acceptable, and how do we know also the din is that the money goes to the father. So we ended up learning, it's based on the pasuk regarding an Amavriya v'yatzachina in kasef. And we ended up saying that ein kesef adan zeh, that when she goes free, showing her simani nairis, she no longer has to give any money to this adain. However, there is another person that she is, so to speak, released from, namely her father, that she does give the money to, namely Kiddushin. So for the Gemara, you can't compare one to the next. After all, when it comes to Hasam, when she was a slave, she's now completely free, which is a complete release. However, when it comes to woman, even though Kiddushin was done, she's not entirely married because she still has to be given over to chuppah. However, since regarding Hafaras Nedarim, the father no longer has the same ability to be made for her Nedarim by himself, so because no longer, even though the father still does it, but it has to now be together with the husband. It's not entirely up to him. So the father now does relinquish some of his daughter, and therefore because of that we can make such a drasha. Is that really what we derive this pasuk to tell us again the din that the father gets the kesef? We need it for something else. The sign we learned and because it doesn't say that she goes free when she goes free, it just says she goes free. So when does she go free? So she goes free when she's a naira, which is between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half, and also when she's a bagris, which of course then itself is hard to understand, because if she already went free when she was a naira, so then she's already free. So what do you mean she goes free when she's a bogeres? So we're going to address that question. But nonetheless, we have this drasha that it tells us when she goes free. Without a yud. My ein kesef so the extra yud is a drasha. How do we know you can make such a drasha? Because there's a yud in the word ein. The sanya. The pasuk says that she has no children. Now, what is this referring to? So this is in a situation where she wants to be able to eat truma. So it's totally if she has children with the man that she was once married to. So if she has no children, how do you know also grandchildren will be an issue that will be ma'akiv this Bas Kohen from being able to eat truma? Again, because she was married to a Yisrael, so therefore, even though she's not married to him anymore, but if she has a child, so that still connects her to him, so that even though her father is a Kohen, she's a Bas Kohen, she's not allowed to eat truma. You have to look into the matter, which means even if it's true, let's say Nebuchadnezzar's son died, but maybe that child before that child died had a kid, and therefore that would also invalidate her. She'll be ma'akev. It'll hold her back from eating truma. Mainly elazer kosher 0 pasmanayin. Let's say she had a mamzer as a child. Talmud zer ein lo ayin lo. It doesn't make any difference. The din is the same. That if she has any child, a grandchild, kosher, puzzle, that will hold her back from being able to eat truma. I thought we were to learn that out for grandchildren. So pretty famous expression. You don't need a pasuk because the din is grandchildren are like children. Because and this is actually learned out regarding dinim of Yavamos, of a Yavama. So also over here, if she has a child, or she doesn't have a child but she has a grandchild because her child died, that's the same thing, and therefore that will hold her back. So you don't need a pasuk for that. So ki yitzrach kra l'zera apostle. So we need the pasuk to tell you that even if her child was a mamzer, that would still be enough to apostle, to invalidate her from being able to eat truma. But Tana Gufa Minole the Darshachi, how does the Tana know to make this drush of ayin law? Samri Ksiv Me'ain Bilam and Me'ain Yavami. It says Me'ain Bilam, that it says Ein B'dait Leil Chimanu, that Bilam originally didn't want to go when he was originally sent messengers, and he slept, and Hashem said, okay, you can go, but don't do good or bad to the Klal Yisrael, don't curse them, don't bless them. So over there's no Yud. Also Me'ain Yavami. The same thing, it doesn't say it with a Yud. Now the look Sibahu Yud, V'hachak Sibahu Yud, Yud, the fact there's a Yud over here, Shemamu L'Rashu Hudasa, it must be that extra Yud is telling us something. And therefore we can learn when it comes to Truma Ayin Law, and we can learn out when it comes to V'yatzachina Mein Kasef, also that it's teaching you that the father gets the money. We need to learn out that the Kiddushin money goes to the father. You can't learn out one from the other. It says Rashi, as bito amma. So why do we need both? Right? We already mentioned, because we said, maybe you can learn out one from the other. So we ended up saying maybe not. So why can't you learn out one from the other? If you already learned out that the money goes to the father of Kiddushin, because she didn't actually do any work. What did she do? She just accepted Kiddushin money. However, her work for her own labor, maybe she should be able to keep. When it comes to Masya Deha, I can understand because he's giving her mizonos. In other words, the father, he understood that because this is something in which he was relying on, because I'm going to pay you, I'm going to give you food, and you give me the Masya Deha. When it comes to this money, it's not something on his das. He's not thinking, I'm going to get this money, because it's not something in which, first of all, it doesn't happen frequently, but also doesn't come in a normal circumstance. It's coming from the Alma, from the world. So you think maybe she should get it because he wasn't thinking about receiving it. Sricha. Kufel. Getting back to what we said before. So we know that this is when they go free. So when does this Amavriya go free? Either as a Naira or a Bogeris. So doesn't make any sense, because if she's already free when she's a Naira, that's it. She shouldn't wait anymore to become free as a Bagris, Bogeris. She's already free. So why do we need that drasha? So Maraba Bazev Limanal. So there's a few answers. So one teretz is Bazev Limanal, that we need one to basically fill in the gap for the other one, because otherwise you would maybe think that she's only going to go free when she's a Bogeris. And therefore, if there's only one slot, you would think the smallest Chiddush, that she would go free later as a Bogeris. So therefore, you need these two slots. Even though Bogeris is not necessary, it fills in that hole, so then you know the other one she goes free even as a Naira. Midi havi a Taishav Sacher. We see the same thing when it comes to a Taishav Sacher, when it comes to the dinim of Truma. Desanya. Taishav, what is a Taishav? What type of an Eved is that? Zek Koni Kinyan Oylam. That's someone that you were kinda literally forever, which is until Yovel. Sacher is Zek Koni Kinyan Shanim. It's someone that you acquired only for years, which we're going to see in Yodalid for 6 years. So obviously his connection to you is less significant. So Kinyan Oylam is again this Eved Ivri who is a Nirtza, and even though he's not like an Eved Avadim Kananim, that we don't say Gufa Kanai, nonetheless, we say he has this strong connection because he's there for many years. So in this situation, they could eat truma. So Yerma Taishav, so mention that regarding a Taishav, V'lo Yerma Sacher, and don't mention the case of a Sacher. V'ani Omer, Kanai Kinyan Olam Inu Eichel, that if you have someone who's been there forever, who's going to be there until Yovel's not allowed to eat truma, so Kanai Kinyan Shanim Lo Kol Shekain, then certainly this Eved Ivri is not allowed to, because he's only there for a certain amount of time. So let's look at Rashi. Eved Ivri hanirtza biad kayin v'afal pikein in gufa kanai like kishar avadim kananim lechel b'truma. So he's not allowed to eat truma. So in Eved Kanani, he's gufa kanai, like you're kind of the guf of this Eved Kanani, and therefore he can eat truma. But an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave or indentured servant, you're not kind of his guf, and therefore because of that he doesn't eat truma. So the question is, so why do you need to teach us both? Tell me that even if he's there for ad oilam until yovel, certainly if he doesn't eat truma, then the one who's only there for shanim. So il ken hoyes because there's two empty slots. So it's the same point as we're saying here by Naris and Virus. Il ken hoyes oimer taishav zekon ken shanim. You would think really that when we say taishav, it's a summons to shanim of ken oichel, but maybe only he can't eat. But someone who's a kinyan oilam could eat. So bas sacher v'limin al taishav shavu b'shekon kinyan oilam inu oichel. That's the whole point of these two empty holes. We fill them both so that we know that not only is a kinyan shanim not allowed to eat truma, but also kinyan oilam. So Amalei Abai bidami hasam trei gufaninu. How can you compare them? These are two different people. So you could maybe somehow think one could eat or one not. They're two different people. One is an Eved who's there for a certain amount of years. One who's there until Oilam. Dechin nami kasav achman taishav nirtza. Even if it actually said the word nirtza, lo yoichel, which would be very clear indicator that it's referring to someone who's there ad Oilam because he was a nirtza. The hadar kasav idach, and then would say it again. Havisacha milsa deas b'kavachar milsa deas b'kavachar tarach b'chasav lakra. You could still say sometimes, even though you could learn out of Kavachaimer, like we were saying, that Ma'adich, someone who is there, Oilam, can't eat Truma, so Shanim certainly shouldn't be able to eat Truma. But sometimes the Pasuk will go out of its way and mention things, even though it could still be somehow derived through logic through a Kavachaimer. The Psukim don't always require that you need to come up with a Kavachomer to be able to understand Pashut Pshat. Sometimes the Psukim will be more clear, even though sometimes you could figure it out on your own. But there, at least there's two different people, so it makes sense that you could maybe say that. It's the same woman. My boy Gabe. She's a Naira, she's gone. So what do you mean that she leaves when she's a Bulgaria? She's already gone. So he says the different shot. Well, Nitzrucha, maybe this is the second answer, assuming the first answer was shrugged up a bit. Well, Nitzrucha el lebeger de islandess. We're talking about a girl who's a Bulgaris, and she's an islandess. So an islandess is a woman who doesn't show simani nairis, and she's also incapable of having children. Now, we don't always know when exactly that's going to happen, that we're going to label her as an islandess, and therefore, generally speaking, we say that we wait until she's 20 years old. Says Rashi, Rashi says this beferish. Ein lo simani nairis v'ashmi'inan kra shiyotzia yimei begurasaha kishihe lo esrim shana. In other words, like this: a healthy girl, developing woman, will leave as an Amavri when she is a Naira at 12, because she shows simanim. However, when it comes to a woman who cannot show simanim, she's not going to have to stay there forever. She will eventually be labeled as an islandess, and she'll be called a Bogaris by default when she's 20 years old. So we're saying that she can go. She will be freed as well. So the chiddush is that you would maybe think she can't go free. And that's what the pasuk tells you that a beggar the islandess does. So Maskav Vav Kavachaimer, who again it's a Kavachaimer. Mas simanim. When it comes to a woman who's able to demonstrate that she has shown signs of maturity by showing simonim. Shein moitzin rishus av. That doesn't do anything as far as her leaving the rishus of the father, but moitzin rishus adain, as we said, that's one of the ways that the Amavriyah will go free. In addition to a certain amount of shanim, yovel, also simonim. So bagrus, once it grows 12 and a half, automatically shemoitzim rishus av. She's considered halachically that she leaves the domain of the father, because the father only has rights to his daughter up until Yemei Nairos, up until when she's 12. But when she hits 12 and a half, she's a bogeris, and she's considered to be leaving the Rishos Av. So certainly she should leave the Rishos Adain. In other words, if we're labeling an islandess at 20 years old, let's say, as a bogeris, we don't need a pasuk l'chara to tell us that she should go free, because it should be a davar pashut. Because if simonim, which is kal, that nonetheless we see she can go free from the Rishos Adain. So when it comes to bogeris, which is chomer, because she even leaves the rishus of her father, so certainly she should leave the rishus of the adain. No sakadat ramina diasis simani naris havis vina. Do asis simani naris lo havis vina. You would think that the whole pasuk has come to tell you that when you sell an islandess, even though when she was a young girl, it has the same halachic status that it's considered to be a valid sale. Because normally we would say, let's say you would marry an islandess, that's considered to be a mekach tos if you didn't know about it. So maybe when it comes to naris, if you have if you have simanim that shows it was a sale. If you don't show simanim naris, it wasn't a sale. As we continue to dalam and beis, kamash muan biyatzachina b'chul. So it's coming to tell you that no, it doesn't make any difference, because you're not marrying her; she's an Amavriyah. So the din is that that's not a svara to say that it's not a zvin, it wasn't a sale, but rather it was a mekach, it was a mechira, it was a sale. However, she still has the right to go free. So ulamar b'Rav Ashi, the Amar b'Lav Kavachaymer who. So what do we do about Mar b'Rav Ashi? He learned it out, pushed it from a Kavachaymer. So then again, if there's a Kal V'chomer that she should go free, then okay, fine. We can understand it's a zvina, it's a sale, but why don't we learn out from Kal V'chomer? So she says, we learned out this notion that sometimes you can learn out, even though from a Kal V'chomer you have a pasuk, that's only when there's no other answer. So in other words, we came up with a good teretz. So the question is, but the question is, why do you need this teretz? L'chari, you can just say, okay, sometimes the pasuk will mention it anyway, even though there is a Kal V'chomer. You're right, but we could still come up with an answer that there is a reason for the pasuk. If there is no reason for the pasuk, and we're no other choice, we're not going to say that's incorrect. We'll just say that sometimes the pasuk writes things which maybe could be derived from a Kal V'chomer, but that's really like the last resort. Okay. Let me see if there's any questions on this. TA1. So TA1 asks, V'yatzachinim elimei bagrus, enkas elimei nairus. Well, Emily Crow will bagaris. Why I need a pasuk? So one is buzz zev limnal zeh. It says three answers. I think it only writes down two. Beggar the islandess. Dezvina the islandess. It's coming to tell you that it's a good sale. Okay, that was TA1. Okay, so it's correct. It's not necessarily is it coming to tell you that she should go free, but the chiddush is that it's a sale. Okay. V'tana ma'isel mahacha. Our Tana learns out this drasha. We learn out from B'yatzachinim in Kasef that there's this notion that the father gets the Kesef Kiddushin, which obviously teaches us that there's a din that you can be Mekadosh woman with Kesef. With our title learns out from here, as we already saw in the first daf, the sign ki yikach. It says the lashon of yikach, which is why maybe it says isha niknis ish isha ubala v'haya imlo timsachen be'enav. If she's not found favor in your eyes, ki matzaba begaimer. What the word ki is, we saw in the end of this gittin. Ein kicha ela bekesef. So it says in ki yikach, it says that you took a woman with kesef, which the fact that the pasuk tells us this is what's done is an indicator that that's maybe the most prevalent or the most accepted. We're going to see you can be mekadosh nish with bia, but maybe that's not accepted. That's not so acceptable or respectful or proper. So therefore, the pasuk is telling you that when you take a woman, it should be with kesef. Okay, which again, as we said, we learned out from Stay Ephraim. We should be able to derive this from a kal v'chomer. Says Rashi, we should need a pasuk. Why? We already established when it comes to a Jewish slave, you cannot be kind of her by having beer with her, but niknas b'kesev, you're kind of her by paying for her. So Zu, this woman you're marrying, sheniknas babia, and din should take the mekesem. So if we could already establish that she can go, you can marry a woman with bia, which we're going to establish later on, or maybe that's perhaps goofa the reason why this pasuk, it should have just said kikach ishisha, but it then says ubala, right? So maybe that's the reason why. Why does the pasuk continue, right? It's still we only needed the words kikach ishisha of in kichel b'kesef. So maybe that's the whole notion. The Gemara brings down uvala to teach us that we can derive from that part also that there's a din bia. So the Gemara says yivama techiach sheniknas b'bia ve'enu niknas b'kesef. Just because we find when it comes to marrying a woman with bia, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can also mekadosh her with kesef, because by yavama it doesn't work. Okay, there's mimer, but we're talking about dini deraisa. Maybe the reason why is because then we're shtar. Termination is b'shtar. So when it comes to yavama, maybe the reason why kesef doesn't work because there's no other way of doing it, not kesef or shtar. But since we establish, or we will establish, that you could be kaina a woman with a shtar, which we're going to see v'yatzav haisa, just like the same thing with a divorce, same thing with Kiddushin. We're going to get to that later on. So the point is, so maybe you can't compare it to Yavama. So when this kal v'chomer should be strong. Well, 1 second. Kikachish halam likra haasilo. We just established it's a good kal v'chomer. It's a good kal v'chomer to learn out from Amma Avriya. So Amma Ravashi mishum deigel memer mikar dedina pircha. You can actually ask a kasha from its source. Mehecha kamaisis law. What are we trying to learn on the kal v'chomer from? Mi Amma Avriya. Malma Avriya shechein yatz b'kesef. We know that when it comes to an Amma Avriya, fine, you could acquire her with money, but you can also release her with money. Timer bezu shein yatz b'kesef l'kikach ish. When it comes to a woman, she cannot get divorced by her paying her way out. That doesn't work that way. So therefore, when it comes to an Isha, since it's not like an Amma Avriya, so you can't learn on a kal v'chomer from Amma Avriya. And therefore, that's the reason why I need a pasuk kikachish. V'yisrach l'michtav v'yatzachinam, v'yisrach l'michtav kikachish. Even though there are two different places where we learn out kesef from, you need both. If it only said kikach and yikach is a lashon of is kesef, havamina Kiddushin diyav l'bal didahava. You would think that the money should go to her. So we'll learn out from that. Maybe we didn't have to learn out from that there's a din that you can be mekadosh nisha with money, but you could at least, we do derive who the money goes to. It goes to the father. Because of Rachman Aviyatzachinam Havamina Hecha Diyav Ihi Lididei Diyav Le Ihi Lididei, when she gives the money to him, Vikidashto Havi Kiddushi. Maybe that would also work. So it has to be that he is the one giving to her and she's not giving the money to him. And therefore, that's what's derived. Otherwise, v'yatzachina in kasev, so kasev, maybe it's referring to either direction. It's kind of hard to understand what that means, that she would give the money to him, but it says, but the money still goes to the Av. Okay. Nonetheless, those are the two interpretations. Okay, let's look at question 5a. Why do we need a pasuk by Kiddushin Kesef? So he said that when it comes to an Amavriya, you can't let out, because an Amavriya also can leave with Kesef. And therefore, a woman who you're marrying, she can only go out, as we saw in the Mishnah, with Get or Misas Abal. So therefore, that would not work. Cannot use that Kabbalah. And now we finally get to Ubala, which is interesting. It goes from Kesef to Bia. And the reason why is because, even though the Mishnah says Kesef, Shtar, and Bia, but perhaps either because, we'll see, once we understand Shtar, maybe we'll understand why it's out of order, but we brought down over here, when we were learning about Kesef, we ended up establishing first that the din is that she is you can be a woman with Bia. That was part of the Kal V'chomer. And then only afterwards we mentioned Shtar. So we're reintroducing this notion. We already understood over here that that's the din, that you can marry a woman with Bia. Now we want to figure out how we see that. Ubala. Malamed, the fact that it says Ubala, which again is also going back, the reason why the pasuk says Ki yikach ishisha, to tell us this din, and it then says Ubala in the Gemara. So it's coming to continue in the reading of the pasuk. Malamed sheniknas babia. V'odenu, you don't need a pasuk. It's a kavachaymer. Ma yavama shein niknas b'kesef nis babia. Oh, yavama. You cannot acquire her with kesef, but you do acquire her only way, as we said in the Mishnahs, would be so zu, a married woman, sheniknas b'kesef. We already established above that you could be coining her with money. So in addition, this babia, so charbia should definitely work. So Amavriya tochiach, and Amavriya will disprove you. Sheniknas b'kesef in this babia. Because just because kesef work, maybe sometimes bia doesn't work. So maybe also when it comes to marrying a woman. So yeah, but malum amavriya she'en kinyelo shem ishus. Termazu she'kinyelo shem ishus. Tamlor mubola. You can't compare it to an amavriya, because in an amavriya, you're not acquiring her as a wife. You're acquiring her as a servant. So, of course, bia shouldn't work. But maybe, just like Yavama Bia works, because it's a Shem Ishus, it also work when it comes to marrying a woman. Tamlam Rubala. So 1 second. V'lam li kro. Why need a pasuk? Asilo. We just established that it's a good Kavachomer. So Amr Avashi Mishum Deikol Meimer Mikar Didina Pircha. You can again ask the question from the original source. Mehecha Kamai Slam Yavama. Mal Yavama Shchin Zekuka Va'omedes. What does that mean? We're going to stop here. Look at Rashi. So, when it comes to Yavama, her husband died, they're childless, so she automatically is now connected to this man before anything. She hasn't done anything with this brother, but she's zokuk to him. Because she was Makadish. She performed Kiddushin was performed with her deceased husband, so that Kiddushin has some connection now also to the brother. Ve'ein bia ba el ligmor. So the bia is just a completion, because the zika is already a connection of a kinyan dimikar lo. Maybe bia cannot work as a kinyan mikara, an initial kinyan. So therefore, because of that, it doesn't work. And therefore, we need a pasuk to tell us that you could actually be kind of an issue with bia. Question 5b. Lumli kro kadushi bia v'lodinhu maya yavama shein niknas b'kesin nis b'bia. Again, when it comes to her, to a yavama, she is zekuka v'omedes. TB2. Madu itzrach trei kroi l'kedushi kesef. Why need two psukim? Gam v'yotzachinam in kasev, gam ki yikach. So let's see what I wrote. In kesef. Actually, I didn't. This was not one of the questions. In kesef malamid shah kesef l'bal. Yesh kesef l'oda nacher av. V'ulai anachnu chayshvim she'im hi nosna hakesef ze gam chal hakadushin u'posik sheni bo lamid shedavka ha'ish noisin hakesef l'isha lo isha lo ish. Adkan.